just super casual, guys. This is just me drinking tea, chatting with you. So get whatever you like to drink. If it's been a hard day and you need a glass of wine, I will not judge you. That's the good thing about meeting God. You learn that it's not your responsibility to judge anyone. Really kind of frees up your thinking because you're like, wow, that person's doing some messed up stuff. But I don't have to worry about that because they're going to sort it out eventually. Hey, hi, how have you been? I have no topics to discuss. I just was like, I got 20 minutes until dinner's ready. And I made myself a cup of peppermint tea. I can't just drink one tea. I have to mix them. I mean, I could just drink one tea, but I won't because this is America, and why should I have to endure such suffering? So I don't like regular, just black hot tea. And so I thought for years that I did not like tea. And then I found herbal teas, and I thought, okay, yeah, I could develop a love for that, but I don't love it. But I thought, maybe I should try harder because when I got COVID, it ruined my taste for coffee. I cannot drink coffee at all. I've tried it. I've tried like the blonde roast, different kinds of roast to see if I could watch them or see if I could drink them. And so I've tried the low acid coffees, and I've just decided that COVID has now ruined my taste for Oreos, which probably isn't a bad thing to be honest, but also for coffee. So I needed to find something because when you spend most of your teen and adult years having a hot cup of coffee in the morning, or midday, and then you want it, but you can't have it anymore because it's going to taste horrible. I know, first world problems, but it was detracting from my quality of life. So I found some rooibos tea, which I really like. It's like a red tea, and it doesn't taste like black tea at all. And so I got that. I really like it. And then I buy some different flavored teas to mix with it. So I have one that's like an orange honey bush tea, and it's really, really good. And then I can't drink just tea. So probably I'm a coffee drinker substituting tea. I'm not really a tea drinker. This is what the English would probably tell me because I have to put vanilla creamer in everything except for the tiramisu tea. Now the tiramisu tea, I love Oreos. I just can't taste them anymore. Like they taste really weird and wrong to me. I don't know what it is. It's very sad. Then I fell in love with pecan sandies. Oh my gosh. Those things have crack in them. I'm sure of it. I can't have them in the house. I have zero control. I made some like more nutritious kind of pecan sandies. And the thing is they taste more nutritious, I wasn't going for a more nutritious taste. I was just wanting to have less sugar. But I did substitute some of the sugar out for coconut sugar, which has a lower glycemic index and makes me feel a little bit better about eating 4 cookies before I go to bed. Anyway, I didn't know who'd be on this time of day because I thought all my friends with kids are pulling their hair out right now, trying to get kids off the bus, I guess, depending on what time zone you're in. And all of my friends who work are still at work. So I'm sorry for that. But you're never going to find a time that works for everybody. It was easier during COVID because you guys were all trapped and you had to listen to me. Well, you didn't have to. Now my comments are a little slow popping up. So if I don't answer you right away, I'm not ignoring you. It's just taking a minute. Timusin Coke says, hello, Penny. My English is not very well, but I read your story and it was really amazing. Having a communication with God shows how special you are for God. We are all just as special for God. I don't know, do you call that lucky? I just got super sick and almost died a bunch of times. And so I got to hang out with God up close and personal, which I would say is so much better than any experience that I've had here because while he's still with us, you can't really see him and all that stuff. Nellie, you're listening at your desk at work. That's so nice. Are you doing work you enjoy, I hope? But anyway, I just wanted to get on and chat with you guys. For my folks that are watching that follow me because of my near-death experience, the latest video is out. Let me see if I can find the link for you guys. I'm not sure how to post that. It's on Anthony Cheen's. This one, you guys, I think is my favorite. And as a bunch of you might know, hi, Jana. As a bunch of you might know, I don't watch other people's near-death experiences, generally as a rule. And the reason that I don't is not because I'm not interested in their experiences, but I find there's a different level of consciousness when I think or talk about my near-death experience. And it's really open because up there you're connected to everybody. Like I could just look at someone and know their life and what they were thinking. Um, and I find when I'm back in that, when I put myself back in that frame of mind and I start talking about that experience, or if I start watching someone else's experience, my concern is that I will accidentally soak up part of their experience and make it my own. And I know that sounds like maybe a crazy thing, but I'm going to tell you this because the reason I'm so careful with it is because there's an author named Neil Donald Walsh. And hi, Danielle. My cousin's on. Did you guys get moved? I need to check in with your mom. Um, there's what was I telling you? Oh, there's this story. So Neil Donald Walsh wrote the books Conversations with God. And the first one's pretty good, interesting, and then it kind of just goes off the rails and gets really odd after that, and super political. And I'm not down on him for being political because, I think like for me, having a near death experience has made me very sensitive to all of the screwed up crap that's going on in this world. And I'm very worried about my fellow people. I just am. Could it be a message to know God better and make research? I don't know. Could be. But I think I just so Neil Donald Walsh wrote this book, right? Oh, you are moved. Oh, love you guys. Neil Donald Walsh wrote this book, and I've actually read it. And the reason so Neil got down the road a little bit. Neil used to apparently tell this story on, I don't know if it was a podcast or what. And it's some story about he goes to this Christmas pageant or something that his kids are in, and they're supposed to hold up some sign that says something, and they end up holding up a sign that says God. That's not the story, but that's as close as I can remember it. So he tells this story, and this lady who actually is the author of that story, who it actually happened to, wrote to him and was like, "Hey, that's not your story. That's my story." And so Neil got on and was, he came forward about it because, of course, anybody who wasn't a person of faith was like, "Oh, yes, this is what we'll use to take him down." And people make mistakes, and I think we ought to have some grace. But he got on and he said, "You know what? I think I probably just read that years ago and put it in a file because I liked the story. And then somehow it got burned into my brain." And at the time when I read that, I thought, "Oh, just admit it and say, you didn't have anything to talk about, so you stole that story." But as I get older, I find that I will tell a story about the kids with the kids present, and they'll be like, "What? No, that's not how it went at all." So I don't know if it's just perception or what, but I always want to be really careful and not accidentally be taking from someone else's experience. So I don't listen to those. But, there is, and plus, it's hard enough to sort out your own experience. I don't know, maybe it would be easier if I watched other people's stories. I just feel like there's enough living to do here. I'm looking for this link for you guys. But anyway, Anthony's a French filmmaker, and he and I, about a month ago, I guess, filmed my story. He had somebody here film it because he's in France, of course. And, this is the full first long form that has B-roll added to it. So B-roll is just like extra footage that you can add to a video to kind of break it up. So you're not just listening and watching that person talk the whole time, and they bring in images and stuff that are meaningful. So his channel on YouTube is called Anthony Cheen Productions. And I think it's out because I think yeah, here we go. No, I don't want to play it. I just want to know the link. Share. Okay, let me copy the link for you guys. Anyway, it's on there. And Anthony he's so sweet. He posted it 2 days ago and it's got 27,000 views already. And it's funny because he's like, "I think I'm shadow banned on YouTube because I'm not getting a bunch of views." But I went and looked and I'm like, your views are actually good, bud. But anyway, it's out and I watched it. And, you're always like super critical of yourself when you're watching yourself on video. I try to give myself a lot of grace, especially with my weight, as my weight's gone up and down since I had COVID. He says, for example, "I am a Muslim, and in the Quran, God tells us we will test you with illness, and those who are patient will be rewarded." I think the Bible talks about trials and tribulations and how God, we make our metal kind of that way by going through tough things and overcoming them. And that's a lot of why we're here, to kind of give our spirit a physical experience. Facebook user says, "Out of all the NDE stories I've watched, Yours has impacted me the most. I sent it to oh, that's very sweet. Thank you. I get a lot of it's always interesting to me because, I'll go through if you guys haven't seen the one on the Shaman Oaks webpage, that one's I think it's at like 1.7, 1.8 million. But every once in a while, I try to go through and read the comments in those because, um, I feel like a lot of people really pour their heart out in the comments section, and I think they think that I see those, but really that's on his channel, so I don't see any of that unless I go in and look. So I'll go in and look and I'll pick out usually I go in and I pick out, like, some of the people that are really struggling, and I'll try to encourage them. But the other thing I'll do is I'll try to and I have a meatloaf going, so, like, in a few minutes, I have to get up and check it, but I'll come back. Um, I find that the people who, like, leave snarky comments, like, somebody left me a comment and was like, "This is obviously a lie." And my nurse brain kicks in, and I'm really a very logical, rational person. I'm not super emotional. And so I'll type in as evidenced by dot, dot, dot. Like you don't know me, you didn't ask any questions. You just jump right to this is BS. And then I had somebody leave a comment one day and it said, and there's way, way more. I mean, if you want to look at the ratio, there's way more good comments than bad ones. People are generally nice. But there was one, and the person says, "Yeah, just wait. I'll be interested to see how much money she's making off this." And I always want to address that because it's interesting to me that people say it. And so I said to the person, "Well, I don't make any money. And in fact, when I go and travel and do talks, it generally ends up costing me." And so I said to him, "And even if I did make money off that, would that be wrong that God like made a way for me to pay my bills and be able to eat and have a roof over our head just because I'm sharing this personal experience that you don't have to share." And I said, I worked as a nurse and nobody expected me to do that for free. And that's a very emotional kind of caretaking sort of job. And I always think it's interesting when people say that. Like if you write a book, they're like, "Oh, yeah, she wrote a book and she made $1 million," which I didn't do. And for all of you who keep asking, they're like, "Oh, I can't wait to read your book." And I always think in my brain, I know, me neither. So I got to chapter 13 and then I got COVID and it just completely derailed me. And I tell you what, if you ever try to write a book, the best advice I can give you from somebody who's not finished one is don't stop. Because once you quit writing, you lose all steam. And I've had a terrible time getting back into it. And I even have an author. This guy messaged me and he's got a publishing company and it was his dad's when his dad was alive. And he said, once a year I find somebody who I think's got a really good story. And then I do the work pro bono and help them get published. And so he contacted me maybe, I don't know, a year or two ago. His name's John Hale, sweet, sweet guy. And I've just not gotten any further than that with it. Even though I have a publisher, I have everything I need. And so I told him, I said, the problem is that since all of the being in all those comas with, that weird respiratory failure issue I was having, I have a really hard time writing chronologically. And I never used to. I write very well and I write easily. It comes easily to me. So when you start, and I got to chapter 13, which is that puts me right at the bridge of now talking because I did my life backwards and all the things that had kind of happened in my life or stories in my life that had made me who I was to that point. And chapter 13 is about where between there and 15 would be where I would start talking about getting sick and the near death experiences. And I didn't know where to go after that. That was my first problem. I thought, I don't have a natural ending for this. Hold on, meatloaf. And I'd reached out to John and I said, "John, what do you think about maybe me writing, um, reworking this into a book of essays? Because I'm really good at writing, 4 pages." And I've had I kind of have this comic book brain. So I'm able to see humor in just about everything. And in the stories that I share in the book are, stories from my coming up and, raising kids alone and that kind of thing. And, kind of my marriage falling apart and all of that years ago. But I thought, I think if I could just write the essays and write the ones before the near death experience in that frame of mind, and then write the ones after it from a near-death perspective. And then I can, so I had gotten to that point where I didn't know, well, where am I going to go after I talk about the near-death experience? Because that'll be like 17 chapters, and that's not enough for a book. And so then I got COVID, and I thought, oh, thank you, God, for this awful thing. This will be a good note to end the story on. But then me getting COVID, almost dying from it, and taking everybody on Facebook, thousands of people along for the journey, because for those of you who maybe don't know, when I got COVID, um, I had already signed paperwork that I didn't ever want to be intubated again. I didn't want to be on the ventilator. And I just, they had told me the last time I was on, I would never survive it again. And I just didn't want to die like that. So when I got COVID, I thought, if it's going to kill anybody, it's going to kill me. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've not left enough of a mark on the world. Like I haven't done enough. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to die, I want to go out doing good. And so I just kind of committed myself to, no matter how bad I looked that day, I was going to get on and I was going to talk about how I was that day and what research I had done and what I'd learned. And, I had to do it with oxygen on and a lot of times a BiPAP on and stopping every, well, every 5 or 6 words sometimes to get a breath. And so I thought, well, that would be a good place to end the story. Well, then the story didn't end there, right? We had the whole, just everything that's gone on the last 2 years and the politics of it and the pandemic and everything that's been so crazy. And I started thinking, you know what? I feel like the thing with a book is a book kind of, it's almost like having a kid. You think you have it all kind of thought up in your brain, and then you have that child. And, you kind of forget when you're dreaming it all up in your brain that that child will have a will and a personality that's completely separate from you. And so then you kind of embark on this journey together, trying to help that person who is probably very different from the person you imagined when you were, wondering what they'd be like when you were pregnant. And you've got to kind of help them navigate life and help them overcome their things and all of that sort of stuff. Well, that kind of felt like that feels to me like what a book is like. A book, if you're writing it well, I think takes on a life of its own, and it becomes something bigger than just your story. And so that's where I'm at with it. I feel like now that we're kind of on the other side of COVID and things have settled down, if you don't know, I've helped 712 people that I know of. So those are just people who've reached out to me, get through COVID, and we've not had any deaths, no hospitalizations. I think all but 2 of the long COVID folks are better, and those folks were people who um, got COVID and like came over to my group. I used to have a Facebook group until they shut me down. Came over to the group after they'd had COVID and not been treated. That's what gives you long COVID, is you get COVID and no one treats you, and then things just kind of get all thrown out of whack. Nellie says, that's when I started following you because of COVID. You were my support system through it all, even though you barely know me. Why did they say you would not? So the last time I was intubated, so I've been on the ventilator 18 times in 2.5 years, and it's a lot of trauma to your throat. And I have, some permanent lung damage from that, and I have issues with my voice still and swallowing. I can get choked really easy, things like that. And they just said, it's just been too much. They wanted me to get a trach, and there was this really mean doctor, and he said, I won't take you off the ventilator unless you agree to have a trach. A tracheostomy, for anybody who doesn't know, that's a little hole that they put in your neck, and then they put a tube in there that goes down if you're on the vent, and they can just hook that up, and they don't have to put you in a coma to breathe for you. And I just felt like, first of all, he was so hateful, and he kept saying, this is just anxiety. When you go to the emergency room, tell them not to intubate you. Tell them to do a scope and see. And I'm like, okay, you're a moron. Because I've been a critical care nurse a long time. And when I was in the ER, I knew what they were basing the decision to intubate me on. And that was my blood gases. They draw blood out of an artery and they test it. And that's how you determine if you're going to intubate somebody. I mean, unless they're like completely swollen up, which I didn't generally do. And you've got to protect their airway, then you'll do it really quick. But my blood gases would just get way off, and they're like, she's going to wear out. We're going to have to put her on the ventilator and put her in a coma. And that's just what he told me. And he's like, you really need a trach because these drugs that we have to put you on, and the more they the more often they have to put you on those drugs. Most people don't go on those drugs ever unless they have surgery or something. But I was on them every couple of weeks. I mean, 18 times over 2.5 years. So, I mean, you do the math there. Um, I mean, that's just a little less than once a month, I guess. But the more you are on those drugs, the more resistant your body gets to them, and the more of those drugs you need. And those drugs are really hard on everything else. And I had had sepsis a couple of times, and that's very serious. Like 70% of people who get sepsis don't survive it. But I had had it a couple of times. I had some really serious ventilator-induced pneumonias, and they were just like, I just don't think you'll be able to survive it again." I think part of it was that I was going into, like, anaphylactic shock where my organs were failing, and, it just was a big mess, and I didn't wanna die that way because you'd think being on a ventilator and in a coma would be really restful. You'd be wrong. It's not. You wake up, and it was always funny to me because they would always forget to put a or almost always forget to put a tube down my nose into my stomach to feed me. And so I'd be on the ventilator for 4 or 5 days generally without being fed and come out of there 6 pounds heavier because of all the steroids, and in just feeling horrible. You just feel horrible when you wake up because, when I had ventilator patients, I would go in every day and move their arms and move their legs and make sure I turned them every, hour or so, do their oral care because all that crap builds up in your mouth. It's really gross. And, you can't swallow, so any drool you make is just running all over you. It's disgusting. I didn't wanna go out that way. And, I knew when I was watching what was going on with talking to some of my friends who are still in critical care, and we were having these conversations, they're like, the ventilator settings that they are using are completely wrong. And they told me what they were, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they're damaging their lungs." And so I knew if I went into the hospital with that I wouldn't survive it because the treatment that they were using was not survivable. And that's I mean, there's pretty strong evidence for that. Like, I keep wondering, when are they gonna look at this and say, "Hey, seems like a good amount of people that we put on this treatment die. Maybe we should try something else." But, that gets into the whole political big pharma end of it, which I tried to really keep separate. So when I got pretty much thrown off Facebook, I didn't get thrown off, but I had a group that I could never post in because I was always in jail for posting things like studies from the National Institute of Health that showed that, if you have an enveloped virus, which COVID is an enveloped virus, you can use surfactant to the outside of COVID, the virus itself is made of fat. And so you can use a surfactant, say dish soap, right? When you pour dish soap into a greasy pan, all the grease kind of goes away. Well, COVID's the same way. And there are some surfactants that are safe to put in the nose. And povidone iodine was one of them. And they had done research on that with flu and with, hey, MedUSA, um, with flu and with SARS-CoV-1 that showed it would strip that coating off of the virus if it was in your nose. And without the coating, the little spike proteins come off, and the spike proteins, once those are gone, it can't do anything to you. And so I thought, okay, well, it off gases for 3 hours, which is all from their data. And I posted that, and I think I got like a 30-day ban or something, and it was one of many. And I finally decided, you know what? I'm done giving content that could save lives to a platform that just keeps shutting me down, even when it's the government's own data. So I wasn't posting anything wild or weird. And there were things that I knew that were not what the NIH was posting that I knew they were helpful because I had tried them and we had done them with all kinds of people up until that point, and we knew how to stop it. We knew how to turn people around, within a couple of days. And I knew I wasn't going to be allowed to share those things. And that just seemed cruel to me. I just was so, I don't know. I was watching all these people die and it needlessly, and they weren't dying of COVID. They were dying of medical neglect. People say, oh, well, the have, if you die, it's because you're not. And I'm like, no, because people who are getting sick and dying too. If you die, it's because you were denied early treatment. And there's no reason for that. And that just seemed heartless to me. And I'd never lived in this country and thought, I mean, I figured there was some shady stuff our government did, but I never would have thought it would be this. And I just kept watching those numbers pile up and pile up and pile up. And I'd see Anthony Fauci at a baseball game, and I'm like, what are you doing? Do you even see what that looks like to us? We're all trapped, and dying and you're telling us, vitamin D is not gonna help," which he knew was a lie. He basically said it on a podcaster's show. And it just it I was dumbfounded. I was dumbfounded. And, it's funny because I was looking and I never could so I have a friend named B. Geyer, and he worked for, the Department of Justice as an attorney for years, and he's retired now. And he and I were going back and forth, and he runs a remdesivir support group for people who were injured by remdesivir or people who lost family members. And he's like, "I just don't understand why doctors would do this. Why would nurses do this?" And I couldn't figure it out either. And then I started kind of putting together, I'm like, "Wait a minute. Doctors and hospitals generally aren't independent anymore. You have hospitalists and intensivists, and you'll have specialists that are independent, but the hospitalists and the intensivists coordinate all of the care, and they actually work for the hospital." And I thought, but still, why would the hospital administration like say, no, you can't give vitamin C, no, don't check their vitamin D levels, like crazy stuff. I'm like, that's supportive care. Why wouldn't you do that? And then probably a month ago, um, I learned that private equity firms and venture capitalists own entire hospital networks like Baptist Health Group or Catholic Healthcare Initiatives or whatever, and they're all owned by these venture capitalists. And um, what was the other one? Venture capitalists and investment bankers. Um, and when I found that out, I'm like, okay, now this makes sense. You've got investment bankers and venture capitalists who own entire hospital systems, who also own huge portions of stock in pharmaceutical companies, who also work hand in hand with the government. Like BlackRock handles a lot of the government's contracts and things like that. And I thought, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. Now incentivizing the hospital to test for the illness, to admit with that diagnosis because there's a bonus, then to treat with what they say. So I'm like, they're making money all the way around. They've got the patient in the hospital. Um, they now worked to get incentives in play, financial incentives through Medicare, and they're going to get that money, right? And then when they give the treatment, they're going to get a bonus. Plus, they're invested in the treatment. They're invested in the test. They're invested in the treatment. Then it all made sense. I'm like, okay, now this makes sense to me. We have venture capitalists and investment bankers who are owning these entire hospital networks. And what they do is they get a doctor and they kind of put them in charge because legally they can't really own it. So they put a doctor in charge of it and then they can do all of those things. And I thought, okay, that now makes perfect sense to me. Why, families are begging and pleading and going to court and, just please just try this. Check my loved one's vitamin D level. And if it's low, fix it. And they just wouldn't. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah. I mean, if you can make over 150,000 over someone who comes in, gets treated, and dies. I mean, when you pay a bonus for the death, that's when we all got to start wondering. So that just seemed like a really good place to, I'm thinking, okay, now that this is all settling down. Hey, Tabitha, let me catch up on your comments here. Timison. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm just totally botching your name. I'm just going to call you T because I don't want to mess up your name the whole time. This world is only an exam, and we're living for earn an endless afterlife. Those who live a life that God wants us to, they will earn the paradise. Yeah, I feel like the testing's been really hard, though. You know what I mean? Like, could maybe he grade on a curve at this point? Because I don't know. I've just seen so much senseless loss. Um, and it just put me in a place where I couldn't write and be inspirational because I was aching for how much we'd lost. Let me get a sip here. Oh, so this is organic peppermint tea, organic peppermint, and I've got so I pour 2 water bottles in the tea kettle, so that's 30, what is that? 16.9 ounces per water bottle. Then I put in, this is ridiculous, you guys. There's some poor kid somewhere doesn't have tea, and it's my fault. Um, so then I put 4 tea bags in it because it's 4 cups of water. I put 4 of the peppermint tea bags in. Then I put a peppermint chocolate tea bag in. Oh my gosh. And then when it's done, I put a little bit of sugar in and some vanilla creamer. It's dessert basically. Nellie says, Penny Wittbrodt, all this needs to go in a book. I know you tried talking to news stations. I did, and other outlets at the time. We kept peeling layer after layer, finding faulty or retracted study after study. Are you planning on putting any of this COVID so that's where I'm at, Nellie. I'm like, what do I do? Do I combine this and do one story? Because what I was doing was I didn't ever talk about COVID when somebody would ask me to talk about my near death experience because I thought, especially during COVID, because I thought, these people I think are looking to these near death experiences because they've lost someone or this has just all been as upsetting to them as it's been to me. And by including COVID in that conversation, I don't want to increase the trauma for people who are listening to the experience because they want to, you know, dig in deeper spiritually or learn more about God or whatever. And then I did a talk. Oh, I know what it was. It was the interview on Rumble that I did with, oh, his name's going to escape me. Noel Wu, last name W-U, Noel, Noel. So if you go to my Rumble page, and let me get that link for you guys. If you go to my Rumble page, there's an interview on there with Noel. Let me see if I can find the exact one. And in that one, for some reason, I mentioned I was talking about COVID, but for some reason I mentioned my near-death experience and Noel, and is it Mary? I can't remember the other lady that was on with us, but somehow it just naturally occurred that I ended up talking about my near-death experience, and then we talked about COVID. Well, I have a friend who I dearly love, who had invited me to do a talk for his group, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth Friends of IANS group, and he's been kind of following me and watching what I do, and that was the first one where I talked about that whole side of my life, that COVID side. Hold on, I'm pulling this link up for you guys. Copy. And my friend said to me, I am so proud of you. Actually, I think the comment's down here. Let's see what he said. It just touched my heart. He says, I love it, Penny, when you answered a question about your comments regarding God's message to you by sharing your near-death experience story in this interview that was supposed to focus on your COVID warrior work. I have thought from the beginning that the two seemingly separate threads, spirit and politics medicine, are actually one, but it's not obvious how they integrate. In this interview, you showed how in truth you are moving toward a living integration of the two. I'm honored to call you friend and want to encourage you to keep letting your purpose unfold. It's been an amazing thing to watch. Is that just the most beautiful thing? It gave me so much hope. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to put this link in for you here on Rumble. And then let me put the link over on Facebook for you guys too. The light's weird. I can't see the box. Hold on. Paste. There we go. So there's the link to that interview if you're interested in that. But that interview, it was funny. I went back, I was kind of going through my numbers the other day on Rumble, and they've really settled off, but I think because COVID settled down. But that interview's got 14,000 views, so that's not a small one. And now I average like around 220 maybe. But I think I'm going to go ahead and start. I hadn't been posting anything to Facebook because I was tired of giving my content away to a platform that was so abusive to people who were just telling their stories and sharing the truth. And I have no respect for them at all. None. And I've got a channel on YouTube that I've not done anything with. And I kind of wanted to bounce it off you guys because you guys are my core group. And I don't know. I feel like, how people will say, don't forget me when you're famous. And I'm not far from famous, but I feel like you guys are the group that got me talking about my near-death experience again and gave me boldness and courage to say true things that were very, very unpopular that now we're finding out were absolutely true. I mean, anybody who's been following me for a while, yeah, exactly. The UK study, the solidarity and recovery trials in UK deliberately overdosed people with 6 times the normal amount of and killed them so that they could say that that drug was dangerous. And in my life as a nurse, there are people who work and they work at that job. Maybe they enjoy it, but it's not a calling. This was a calling for me. Nursing was a calling. I knew from the time I was a little girl, I kept telling people I was going to be a doctor. And then when I found out how little time doctors had to bond with patients, I'm like, no, I want to be a nurse. So I've known this since I was 7. And I remember we came to Kentucky when I was 9 years old. We were living in Michigan, and I was so car sick, you guys. I am still to this day, I'm just a mess. I am the most car sick adult I know. My daughter still gets pretty car sick, but I mean, I have to take something before if we're gonna go on a ride that's more than 15 minutes, I have to take something. And I remember when I was a little girl, we would come here to Kentucky. We'd go through Cumberland Falls, which is gorgeous. Just the canopy of trees in that area as you drive through is amazing. And my grandpa lived in Beulah Heights, which is like kind of Whitley City. And we would go visit him and we'd have to drive through Cumberland Falls. And it always made me so sad because I was so sick at that part of the ride because it was like this the whole way. And I remember laying on the seat and saying to my parents, "When I grow up, I'm gonna move to Kentucky and become a nurse." That was prophetic because we were in Michigan, and I never we'd lived in Kentucky for a little while my dad was between jobs, but that was it, maybe a couple of months during my freshman year. Well, when I got married, I was in Kansas and Missouri, kind of both of those, and then when my husband left and ran off with another woman, I moved in with my parents in Illinois because I hadn't been to nursing school, I didn't have any way to support me and the kids, and I needed to get back up on my feet, and I just took a total emotional nosedive when that happened. Um, I mean, I was suicidal, it was really bad. It was a very dark time for me, and my dad wanted to move to Kentucky to be closer to his dad, whose health wasn't that great. And so we moved here, and I went to nursing school here, and I graduated from nursing school. And I remember at my pinning ceremony, because I didn't go to graduation, but at my pinning ceremony, I remember sitting there and I flashed back on that moment when I was in the car, lying down in the back seat with my dad's hard hat on the floor so I could throw up. I mean, what a great memory, right? And I remembered saying that when I grow up, I'm going to move to Kentucky and I'm going to become a nurse. And I had done it. And I'm like, that wasn't me. That was a prophetic word from God over my life. And I remember going to nursing school and thinking, I can't finish anything. I couldn't make marriage work. What makes me think I can do this? A single mom with 3 kids. And I feel like in my life, it was the first really hard thing I finished. And it was life changing for me. Every time I look back now and think, how am I going to get through this thing? I'm like, you finished nursing school as a single mom with 3 kids. You can do anything. And I always tell people, whatever you're doing that's hard, just finish it. Even if it's the first thing you've ever finished, finish it because you'll always have that to draw on. We've been watching live from Daryl's house, Daryl Hall, like from Daryl Hall and John Oates from Hall and Oates. Remember them? Hey, um, I've been watching that and it's really fun because they had the other night we were watching, and this wasn't a new one. It was just one we happened to find. And it had the lead singer of Styx on there. You guys, he's not lost a beat. He was so good. It was just such a joy to watch him, and you could tell he strikes me as really shy. Um, but he was on there, and you could see he was nervous because he'd never run into them before. He didn't know any of these people, and even in touring, had never, had conversations with Daryl Hall. And he gets on there, and you can tell he's kind of shy. But once he gets going, he's like, "Wow, this is so much better than just playing in my basement." And you could see that connection, and it just was beautiful. I just so enjoyed watching it. It gave me, hope for humanity. T says, "COVID is also from God. The whole world was only focused to live the best life in this world. Earning money is the only goal for all of mankind, but making research of religion is forgotten. COVID was a message for wake up and think about what is the reason of life and what happens when we die." That's actually a good point. I wouldn't agree that COVID's from God, but I do believe that God um, allows the universe to spin as it will. And, to me, to say it would be from God would mean it would have to be naturally occurring. You've got people taking it out of a vat and then souping it up so they can make a vaccine for the souped up version that never would have been a version if they just left it alone. But you make some good points there, T, because I do think it's woke. I think up until now, we were all just kind of living our lives, and we had forgotten about how important it is to be involved in our schools and our government and know what's going on. We just kind of let them take the wheel, and we were handling our lives, and they were supposed to be handling everything else. Me too, MedUSA. MedUSA loves Hall and Oates. Watch that live from Daryl's house. It's so good. There's so many. There's one that's got Jason Mraz on it, and it's so good. I love Jason Mraz. But this was a huge, huge wake up call. And I mean, ginormous, huge. I mean, I feel, we're all partly responsible for just kind of letting someone else take the wheel over things that are so important. But now we know, and now we're looking, and now we're assessing everything they tell us, and we're understanding the motivations behind it. I mean, I never trusted big pharma to begin with, but I never knew it was this bad. I never knew that, over 40% of the government's income comes from big pharma, or the FDA's income. I was blown away to learn that. And then everything I saw was just so corrupt. And I remember what it was like to be asleep and not know any of those things. I remember thinking our government's basically good, and they're trying to help people around the world. And, these NGOs, like the Bill Gates Foundation is making vaccines available to people. And then all of this happened, and I really started looking critically at all of this. And I was like, I, I mean, I was astounded. I would have never thought the corruption went so deep in our government. It's both sides. I mean, I'm not taking a side here. There's so much blame to go around. It's ridiculous. Um, and says you have tons of support. I have to tell you guys, I would not have survived COVID but for Facebook. It, it's I'm not giving the hat tip to Facebook. I'm giving the hat tip to my tribe on Facebook. I There were days that I was like, I'm just going to give up. I'm not gonna, make myself turn and deep breathe and cough, and I'm not gonna wear this oxygen. I'm just gonna go to sleep, and that's gonna be the end of it. Because it's 53 days is a really long time to suffer, especially when no one will help you. No one will do a chest X-ray, no one will do labs. You just have to die. That's your sentence, unless you want to go to the hospital and be killed in a painful way. I wish you to read the Quran, please, please. I actually do read a lot of different um, not now, but I did right after my near death experience. I read a lot of different religions, um, holy books, so to say. I've read some of the um, Jewish Bible that's got like the Maccabees in it. The one that I've got, I can't remember if it's got the Maccabees in it or not. And then the older Catholic Bibles have some books that are not in the King James. And so there's a lot of inspired texts that you can read that will really give you deeper context. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it was interesting when I was up there, there were other people, there in the place I was in, I guess. And I remember they were all dressed differently. And I asked God, I'm like, why is everybody dressed differently? Because I assumed they'd all be in like choir robes or something. I know that sounds silly, but I didn't know. And he said, oh, they're all dressed in the way that they imagined they would be dressed when they got here, which was interesting because that kind of gives some credence to this idea that we are creating in our mind something that is eternal, right? And you don't get to make all the decisions about what's over there, but that was one of them. And I just thought it was really interesting. And then I realized I had a sense of my body, but I didn't have a body that I could look down and see really. It's weird. It was kind of, it's so hard to describe, you guys. I wish I had better words, but I remember God said to me, you're dressed in light. And I was like, whoa, I'm dressed in light. How cool is that? And I was sporting light, man. I look good, you don't have all like the nervousness about the way you're built and all that kind of stuff there. At least once I got past it, I didn't. Um, but yeah, I would agree. I do think there are things on this earth that are definitely evil and are not from God. But that said, God doesn't stop them, so there must be something to be learned from it. And I never know, I don't have all the answers, so I never know how far that goes. Like people say, well, what about somebody who kills a child? Why didn't God stop that? I don't know. They're just things I don't know. That's tragic and awful. I have seen higher good come from it, but it's still a tragedy just the same. And it's kind of like that day that I said to everybody on Facebook, I'm like, you guys, they had been fighting to help me get this medicine that the pharmacy was refusing to fill. And we couldn't get the governor to help us. We couldn't get the board of pharmacy to help us. And I had been doing better. I just needed that higher dose and I couldn't get it. And for I had been sick a couple weeks, but for 6 days, everybody had been trying to get hold of somebody who could help. And I remember getting on that day and saying, you guys, it's not going to happen. And, you know, I just was overwhelmed by the amount of love that everybody had for me. And people would message me. They're like, I get on every day just to make sure you're still alive. And I mean, kids, the tribe was huge. Um, I mean, thousands of views on those videos. And I said, you know what? Sometimes a tragedy has to happen for good to come. So if I die, if because I couldn't get this medicine, I need for you guys to tell my story so this doesn't ever happen to anyone else. And I remember telling the story of Job. And I'd always hated that story, where God and Satan are kind of in this match about does Job really love God because he really loves God, or does Job really love God because Job is so blessed? And that was Satan's argument. He's like, oh, well, he just loves you because you're so good to him. But if all this calamity befell him, then it wouldn't be like that. And so God's like, okay, well, do whatever you want, just don't kill him. And that part, that was such a big sticking point between me and God, because I just thought that was the most awful story. And what kind of loving father would say, okay, do what you will, but don't kill him? You're right. God does not waste anything, not even evil. And so here Job's suffering. He's got no support. I had a whole thousands of people, loving me and encouraging me to keep going and keep fighting. But Job didn't have that. And people came to Job and they're like, back then, if you were sick, it was considered that you had done something. You've done something wrong. Let me see if I can fix this. Stream is really blurry. Um, uh, it's on high def. I don't know why it's doing that. But Job's friends, sorry, my nose is so itchy. Job's friends would come over, to visit him in his suffering, jerks. I'm not sure if these were friends or not. The whole thing seems really sketchy to me. But Job's friends would come and they would say, Job, why don't you just curse God and die? And I thought, wow, that's cold. But they kind of had it in their minds, I'm sure, because that was what people believed at the time, that Job had done something and that he had deserved it. And Job says, and in that moment, I understood it. And I was almost ashamed that I hadn't understood it before. Job says to God, so he's gone through all of this, and I've read different commentaries on it. Like some people are like, he's mad at God when he says it. But I think they're wrong. Job says, though you slay me, still I will trust you. And in that moment, I got it. I'm like, oh my gosh, Penny, you of all people should have known this. Job knows that he is not his body, that he is a spirit inhabiting a body for a time. And that no matter what happens to him, even if he dies, that he is going to be with God. And so he's going to be okay. So he's not going to, he's not going to curse God because he knows ultimately where he's going. And I thought, Penny of all people, you should have known that. And it still gets me that I lived under that, kind of holding a grudge against God for that story. But I'd never heard anybody explain it that way. Where Job is saying this because Job's like, though you slay me, no matter how bad it looks and no matter what everybody else thinks it is, everybody always has kind of this take on what's going on, so everybody then was thinking, oh, Job's done something and God's mad at him and he's cursing him. And, why don't you just curse your God and die? And Job won't do it. Though you slay me, still I will trust you. And it's hard. Have you guys been in that situation where things are so bad you're not sure you're going to survive it? Hi, Enlighten. We're doing a tea time or coffee or whatever you're drinking. Have you ever had that experience where you just surrender to it? You're like, I don't understand this. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand all of the evil that I'm seeing, but I'm going to trust in God and not trust in my eyes. And I'm going to trust that God will take this and turn it for good, because that's his business. That's what he's in the business of doing. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, we don't fight against people. We don't fight against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. Powers and principalities. And I thought, powers and principalities are spiritual things, and they can do things that can fool our eyes and make us believe that the creator of the universe is no longer in charge and that he has just turned his head and walked away from us, when in reality, we're the ones that did the walking. And I think we have to look at this situation like T said. This is a wake-up call. Are we just going to sit down and take it and feel sorry for ourselves and wish somebody would do something? We're the somebodies, you guys. We're supposed to be the light on the hill. We're supposed to be the light on the hill. Who were you the light for today? And I'm not judging you. I mean, we all have to do this, right? Who were you the light for? I look back at my life and all the years I wasted just kind of hiding behind that wall because I didn't want to get hurt anymore. And I doused my own light. I hadn't lived. I hadn't come here and honored God. I mean, I really believe we agree to come. I don't believe that we're just plunked into this life. I believe we have some say in it. I have no way to prove that. Um, but I know God thought me up before he made me. And so I at least existed in his mind. And that's really the only place that matters, right? I existed in his mind. I feel like we are absolutely here for a time such as this. If you feel like the world is just caving in on you, and I think that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you feel like the world is just caving in on you and there's no hope and the corruption goes so deep that we will never get past it, we 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 fight against a defeated foe. I got goosebumps. The battle's won. He can run his mouth all he wants, but he is defeated. It was finished. Jesus said it. It is finished. On the cross, he said it. And what did that mean? Did that mean life? No, no. But it meant that battle with that adversary, he was defeated in that moment. And yes, he may run around here running his mouth like the big kid on the block that bullies everybody. But in the end, he loses. And that's why he runs around and thinks he's so big and thinks he's got it all going on, right? He's trying to convince us. Somebody told me one time I was having these terrible instances. I had been attacked by a patient and it was really bad. And I was off work trying to recover from that. And in his home, I was a home health nurse. And I would wake up in the middle of the night. And I don't mean to like freak you guys out or sound like I'm weird, but I mean, this happened to me. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't speak, I couldn't sit up, I couldn't move, but I was awake, and I would see this darkness come up from the edge of my bed, just kind of a dark figure, and then it would get so cold in the room I could see my breath, and I was terrified, and I didn't tell anybody because it sounded crazy, and I knew I was going through some emotional stuff from being attacked by this man, and the last time it happened, this thing came up at this edge of my bed, and it said, "You're so scared, I could kill your children right now and you wouldn't be able to get up." And it jolted me. And I remember we had church that night. It was like a Wednesday night. And I went to the people on the worship team. I told them what was happening. And they're like, "We're going to come to your house." And I'm like, "Now? It's not even clean. I wasn't ready for this. They're like, "No, we're going to come to your house." And they came to my house and we went in that room and they were praying. And they're like, "You have to pray. You have to tell that thing to leave. You are the authority. You have the authority of God in you. Why are you scared?" And Ken, was that his name? Ken? Oh, I can't think of the name. He played drums. Anyway, he looked at me and he said, "There's no fear in you." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, there is. I can feel it. You're not going to convince me there's no fear in me. There's absolutely fear in me. I am terrified." And he said, "No, no, God does not give you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. The fear you are feeling, the Satan, this evil force, can hold up a mirror to you and he can reflect his fear onto you. And you'll think it's your fear, but it's not, because we do not have a spirit of fear. And you have to resist that." He says, "You can either take that and agree with him and say, 'Yes, I'm terrified,' or you can say, 'No, that's your fear. That's you looking in a mirror. You're afraid. And you are trying to gain power and get some of that out of you because it's awful to be terrified by putting it into me. And I refuse to take it. I will not accept it. I will not take your fear. I am a believer. I live a life where where my king has already conquered the foe. And so you can run your mouth all you want. Run your mouth all you want because your time here is limited. Your days are numbered. It is almost over for you. And I will not be afraid. I will not lessen your burden of fear because you have done this to yourself. I will live an empowered life. I know the battle is won. I know that this foe that we, get intimidated by has already been defeated. And I will live that way. And it's hard, you guys. It's hard. It's not any easier for me because I've had a near death experience. Just the other day, I was like, you know what, Lord, just come take us. Drop the big one. I'll go outside in the front yard and just take deep breaths. And that'll be the end of it because I am exhausted. I am so, so tired of watching evil crush heads. And that's what it feels like to me. It feels like he's just stomping around and, there'd be some person there who's not paying attention, innocent, and he just stomps their head and that's it. And I thought, you know what, Penny, you told God, you said, look, I don't know if you want to do this or not, but there is work to be done. And there was a moment in my life where I looked up at God and I said, I am so tired of these politicians and these people who are put in authority, who are supposed to be protecting us, who are supposed to be looking out for our interests, not Big Pharma, not anybody else, us. They're supposed to be working for us. That was the contract we made with them. And they're not doing it. And God's like, and I said, okay, if they can't do it, then send me. Send me. I'm 5 foot nothing. People may not take me seriously because I don't have enough credentials after my name. But by God, I serve a living, resurrected God. He is not dead. He is not in the grave. He is still on his throne. He's still on his throne, you guys. He's just waiting for us to remember it and say, whoa, hold on, wait a minute, I forgot. I serve the conqueror. I serve the overcomer. I'm not a victim. As long as you believe you are a victim, you will live in misery. You will put yourself in situations where bad things happen to you. You will get focused on one part of your life and you will make that part of your life your God, whether it's your sexuality or you've got an addiction or whatever it is, because you forget that you serve a living God who has already defeated the foe. You will, when you either refuse to believe that or you forget it or you despise it, any of those situations, we all have this thing in us that wants a structure, that wants a higher order of things, right? We just do. We want this higher order because otherwise this is all just chaos. It doesn't make any sense and it's super scary. Life does feel heavy right now. I'm telling you, we're in this situation and we can either believe the lies and believe what we see. How many times have you been in the car and you didn't see something coming and you got hit, or the person in front of you didn't see it coming, but from what they were looking at, it looked like they were doing everything right. And you're like, oh man, that guy's going to get broadsided, whatever, right? We've all been there. We've all seen it. We have got to trust that there is this higher authority. And we have got to appeal to this higher authority because I can only see what's right in front of me. You know how you'll be in a traffic jam? So you're in a traffic jam and you're back, however far, and you can't see what's going on up ahead. And, so you'll lean out and you'll try to look and get out of your car and, what the heck is going on up there? And you think, gosh, I'm going to be here forever. And you'll try to figure out a way to turn around. And have you ever done that and turn around and then traffic starts moving? What's interesting to me is one time that happened to me and I was on a hill and I could see what was happening and I could see that they were just about cleared up, but I could look in the rearview mirror and see all the cars turning around because they're like, we're never going to get out of here. This is a hot mess. We're going to be stuck in this traffic forever. I got things to do. I'll just turn around. But I could see because I was up on the hill. I was on the shoulders of God. I could see what was going on down the road and I knew it was just going to be another few minutes and we were going to be able to get through. And I would just encourage you to remind yourself of that. You're in the traffic jam right now. You're not up on the hill. You can't see what's happening. It doesn't matter because you serve a risen God. You serve a God that has already defeated the foe and he can strut around and he can run his mouth all he wants, but he's full of crap. He's all bluster. He's all bluster. It's like the kid that bullied me in high school, bullied me and bullied me and bullied me, and I was scared to death to stand up with her because she was never alone. She always had, 4 other girls in hock, and I'm like, "Well, son of a gun, I can't beat 4 people," and I was no bigger then than I am now. I was much smaller, actually. And one day, that girl went and was cruel to my brother who's disabled. And so he was on a bus that he would ride our bus to school, and then he would get on another bus to go to the school where they offered special education. And he said he's on this bus, right? He's 15 months older than me, so we're teenagers. And I hear him crying. I was always his keeper, always, still to this day. Um, and I just honed in on it. I'm like, "That's John. Where's John?" And so I went and I found him, and he was sobbing. And I'm like, "What's wrong?" He said, "Well, this girl, she came up to me. She asked me if I wanted to be her boyfriend, and I said yes. And she said, 'Do you want to kiss me?' And I said yes. And she said, 'Well, too bad, because I'd never let a stupid retard like you kiss me.'" I mean, does she kick puppies in her off time? What the absolute hell, right? And she had bullied me for over a year, and I never would do anything about it. But one day, she went too far, and she attacked my brother. And I'm like, "That's it. That's it. You're done." And I found out that day, as I beat on that girl in the hallway, God forgive me, um, that you can go too far. You can anger, you can stir my wrath because I'm just not a wrathful person generally. But once she hurt my brother, that was it. And she was in for it. And she was never going to bully me or my family ever again. And she never did. That's the kind of God we serve. God sees that we're fighting, and he's just waiting for that moment when we're like, "Oh, wait a minute. I have access to the entire power of the universe. I don't have to do this all by myself." That's why we're feeling so low. That's why we're feeling, so beat down. That's the goal, you guys. If you know what the plan is and it makes sense to you, then it's so much easier to get over it, right? So if you know the plan is to dehumanize you and make you feel like you're the only person who still believes in life that used to be normal and used to make sense, and you used to just be able to assume some basic facts were basic facts. It didn't alter for every person a day at a time. There was no my truth, there was truth, and then there was your experience. And your experience can vary, but truth is truth. And we've just gotten to this point where they have just beat us down so much. We're to the point where we're like, "Okay, I'll do whatever you say. Just please let me have my life back." And I'm telling you, don't surrender. Don't give an inch, because you're not going to get your life back by doing it. You're not. Think of all the people who have been canceled, right? You get these people, there's 2 groups. There's the group that gets canceled and they're like, "Oh man, I'm canceled," and they're upset about it. And then they never work again in Hollywood, or they never can do anything again because they got canceled. Oh, night to you. T, thank you for joining us. Um, I forgot where I was. Help me, guys. You guys used to be so good at this. Let me read the comments while I'm trying to think of it. "I remember the night you were live and telling us you may not make it. Prayed literally all night long." You guys, I know so many people who prayed without ceasing for me. And I honestly believe that's why I'm here. There's so much power in love. Yes. Oh, okay. So you're everything seems alone, and like you're the odd man out. And the fact that, you know who you are, that you're the oddball because of that. The fact that we used to just be able to observe simple facts and those things were truths, that's out the window now. And the goal isn't so much to convince you as to marginalize you if you can't be convinced, or if you won't be convinced. And I just want you to know you're not alone. You're not the only person out there that thinks that this has become, pardon my language, a total shit show. I mean, truth is lies, lies are truth, nothing makes sense anymore, and they can flip the game at any point, you know? So the thing that you finally agree that you're, "Okay, I'll go along with it, and I'll understand it this way," and then the next day they flip it as something different, just to keep you off kilter. Look at what they do to people in, deterrent camps and concentration camps. Everything is to keep them off kilter. Everything is to make them think that the savior is never coming. Everything is to make them think that they're defeated and they're alone and that they don't have enough power to change this situation, right? No one's coming for you. What do kidnappers do when they take somebody, right? No one's coming for you. Your parents don't love you. I wouldn't have been able to get you if your parents had loved you and kept an eye on you. I'm all you've got. And then the person just generally gives themselves over to that because they need some kind of structure, something they can understand. And so now what they understand is my parents didn't love me. I've been kidnapped. Um, and this person is all I've got. And we have got to snap out of it. Snap out of it. Snap out of it. You were not born in the wrong body. If you're going through that, I understand it's hard. I have several friends, and that's not to be like, oh, I have a black friend. I never know how to say that because you can't even say, oh, I have a friend, who's transgender, because then it's like you're saying, oh, I have a black friend. Well, I have more than one black friend, but you can't ever say that out loud because somehow giving voice to the fact that you have diverse friendships is now not okay. I'm not playing anymore. Snap out of it. Snap out of it. If you have become convinced that God built you and knit you together in the wrong body, that's not from God. You have had some hard times and you are trying to sort it out with the facts that are now being given to you. I mean, when you've got in a particular state, when you've got a 500% increase in transgender children, that's not just a bunch of kids who were scared to talk about it. That's a trend. I mean, how many of you as a kid decided you were going to be um, a vegetarian? And I'm not saying it's the same. Don't get all worked up. You decided you wanted to be a vegetarian. Now, for some people that may have lasted, but for most of us, it was like, oh man, it's pizza night though. You know what I mean? It just didn't last. It was those fads you go through. As a child, you're trying to figure out who you are and you're trying to differentiate from your parents. This is normal. As a little girl, I was a tomboy. I didn't want to wear dresses. I even for like my high school pictures, my mom had to talk me into wearing makeup. I wanted to climb trees and wrestle with boys, and that's just who I was, and that was okay. Do you remember, like, just maybe 5 years ago, the story was, that you were being, a bad parent if you didn't let your little boy play with dolls. Actually, it's older than that since when I had kids, and you didn't let your little girl play with trucks. And I remember hearing that and thinking, that's true. Why are certain toys boy and certain toys are girl? Any kid should be able to play with any toy they want to play with. Um, and now, if your kid wants to play, if your little boy wants to play with dolls, then he might need to have his genitals removed. You guys, that's crazy. That's crazy. How many roles did you try on as a kid that aren't who you are today? I was a tomboy as a kid. I just was. That's just who I was. I wanted to wrestle and roughhouse and climb trees and build forts and capture frogs and snakes and that is just, who I was. I didn't want my hair combed and I didn't want to sit while my mom fixed my hair and I just rejected all of those things. And today I would have a very different future than I had then. And I'm like, can we not just allow children to explore their roles and explore the different things they're trying to differentiate? Can we not love them through that? And can we not just encourage them that they're perfect? You're perfect. Your body is just as it should be. Your thinking and the things you like to do, that's okay. You're a kid, and this is such a great time in your life because you can explore so many different things. You can figure out what you like to do, all these different things. And let's not interfere with it. Let's let them have their childhood. I just, we need to snap out of it. We need to not be afraid to say these things. Um, there is no, there is no good research data that supports any of this. There's just not. Do we have people that are struggling with gender confusion? Sure, we do. You guys, a lot of the comments that I get or messages that I get, people that find me, will be people that are struggling with their sexuality. A lot. I mean, I would say at least half. And I'll have somebody message me and they're like, I'm gay and I want to have a relationship with God, but I know that He's disgusted by me. And I'm like, okay, whoa. First of all, not true. Second of all, we're all falling short in some way. Um, and then we'll talk about it. And I remember talking to this one guy, and I don't want to give details of his life, but he had not been able to have a fulfilling relationship with either gender. And I'm like, "Well, then why do you assume you're gay?" And he's like, "Well, what else could it be?" And I'm like, "Maybe," and so we started talking about his childhood and how, his dad willfully and in a mean way withheld love from him. So he would put his arms up to hug his dad, and his dad would turn his back on him. That's cruel. And I'm like, "Could it be that you are a grown-up trying to heal childhood pain with adult solutions?" Because it doesn't sound like any of them are working for you. And I want you guys to know that, just because so many people, and I've been banging on about this for a while, so many people who are atheists or agnostics are that way, have come to that belief because of things that church people have said or done to them. And as a church, we need to stand up and own that, and we need to apologize. We just do. That is not what the church is for. The church should look more like a hospital, right? It should be for the broken. This is where you're supposed to be able to go and be loved, and have people support you in finding out what that special something is that God knit into you, and that's why you're here. That's what the church is supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be helping people find their way and raising up warriors of the faith and teaching them to become the light. And instead, you go to church and people gossip and talk nasty about you and get little squabbles going. And you sat in their seat, and so everybody kind of looks at you weird because apparently their initials are carved into the pew right under their butt. No, they're not. That's a new person in church. Be nice. You're only there a couple hours a week. I think you can do it. Church should feel different than every other place you go, you know? And I'm just we have got to be the light on a hill. I've seen so many people that have walked away from church because of people, and I'm like, people are not God. In fact, I struggle with the whole church thing because I hear so many things, and I'm like, that's not at all what God was like. Not at all. And I think there's this power dynamic where certain Christians are almost tickled that these people are going to go to hell according to their belief. Oh, those people, they're awful. They're all going to hell. And they're kind of smug about it, like it assures their place in heaven. And I'm like, shame on you. Shame on you. You have no idea what that person's gone through. You have no idea what's brought that person to that point. You have no idea what garbage has been fed into them or what love has been withheld that has left them in this state. And rather than love them, and rather than be the light on the hill, you pile on. Shame on you, church. Shame on you. It is time to do what Christ did. Christ push away the prostitute, the sinner, the tax collector? No, he did not. He loved them. He told them the truth, but he loved them. And then he didn't go and share their secrets with somebody else. If you are gossiping in church, shame on you. I pray God convict you right now to shut your mouth. You are shoving daggers into chests every time you do it, whether you know it or not. And let me tell you, I know why. And this may feel like I'm coming down on people, but I feel like it needs to be said. When I was in heaven, God showed me, or whatever that waiting room was outside of heaven, that thoughts have power, words have more power, deeds have more power, but every thought has energy to it. And that's why the Bible is so rich with um, conquer your tongue, control your thoughts, think about things that are lovely and beautiful and kind, right? Because you can get sucked into that other way of thinking where you're like, those people are weirdos. And granted, they're doing some pretty weird crap. Um, but you can't get in this cycle where that's all you're thinking about. What is beautiful? What is kind? What is lovely? Right? You have to start thinking about those things. And when you start focusing your mind, and you know how you'll know where your heart is and where your spirit is by the conversations you have. Start paying attention to the conversations you engage in, or that you want to engage in, or that you know the things that you run straight home to tell your husband. Are most of those good, kind, lovely, helpful, encouraging, or is most of it bitching, complaining, judging? And then you'll know where your heart is. That's how I know where my heart is. When I get in that state, and I do. It does not any different for me. When I get in that state where I'm like, oh, these people are just ruining the world, and we just need to just, completely just crash down on these people because it's just messing everything up. And then I'm like, whoa, whoa, since when are you the judgment of God? You're not. If you can't fix that situation, then you can pray about it, but don't make it worse by thinking hate on those people. Let me catch up on comments here, and then we're going to close because I got to get supper on. Um, Enlighten. Wow, I've had these exact thoughts even with the story of Job. Job is such an inspiration to me now. Life is so overwhelming, Med. I agree. Hugs to you. It is so hard. And I know so many of us are, yes, bitter. We're having such a hard time. We're feeling alone. We're feeling like everything, like even if we do the right thing, it won't turn out because you've got people that are playing a game, and they know how to tilt it the other direction. But never, what does the Bible tell us? Never tire of doing good. Never grow weary of doing good. If you're struggling with wanting to choke people, and I get there all the time. You're wanting to choke people, you're just consumed with anger and bitterness and negative thoughts because this world is such a hot mess. Remember who you serve. You serve a risen king, right? We know the end of the story. I know the plot is exhausting. I'm so tired of the plot. I'm like, Lord, round it to the end. I can't take much more. But remember that, this foe that we feel so beat on by is just bluster. He's full of it. He knows he's beaten. He's just trying to, rain down as much havoc as he can before he's out. Don't let him do it. Don't let him steal your joy. That's the basis of it. Do not lose your joy. If you're struggling with losing joy, you've got family that believe completely different than you and you can't get through to them. Just go back to beginning. Go back to the beginning. What things that your family is doing, that what of those things are good and what of those things can you focus on? And how can you build your child up, your adult child even, in those things? My kids, our kids, all of them believe completely differently than we do. And it's tough because you're like, gosh, I raised these kids. How is it that they believe completely differently than we do? But it's because they're seeing this all play out through their eyes, through their experience. And so our job is to focus on the good in them and amplify it. And I say that, let me find that for you guys because that is a good word. Hold on a second and I'll close with that. Let me make sure I got everything first. Um, Life Humanity says planned worldwide atmosphere of fear, trauma, cowardice, inaction. Good word. Mistrust, division, submission. Very good. All true. Med says, I'm glad my parents didn't chemically castrate me when I was 5. I'm glad they didn't either because you deserve that time to sort yourself out and to experience, life the way that you felt more comfortable doing those boyish things like I did. And why are they boyish things? Why can't we just be athletic and rough and tumble? And that used to be the conversation, and now it's like, "Oh, no, you can't be those things because if you're those things, then you're a boy." And I'm like, "Well, n no, like, remember when we weren't supposed to tell them what toys to play with because that's weird?" Enlighten says, "I have 4 daughters that are way more disgusting than me and my 3 brothers were." Okay, so let me find this thing for you guys. I had shared, I guess I'll share it with you guys in case you haven't heard it. So when I came back after having that first near-death experience, God popped into the room and scared the snot out of me because I didn't expect him just to pop in, which we had a good laugh over because he's like, "I'm always here." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, but you don't generally just pop into the room like that." But I want to read this to you because I think it's important. So this was the message he gave me. Such folly to think anything escapes my knowing is when you were with me all at once, all that I allowed you to know, you knew. Let me share this screen. Hold on. Because I think for me, it always helps me if I can see what's being read. Okay, let's do that. There we go. Okay. As when you were with me all at once, all that I allowed you to know you knew. No words were spoken, nor were they shouted. I whispered them to your spirit. I discreetly filled you with knowing. Knowing flowed into you as effortlessly as taking a breath. Is it not so? The great I am. No truer words have ever been spoken or written. The great I am is in your core. The great I am is the light. Even when I'm hidden, still I am. As my energy charged, sending me over each synapse in your brain, Even those small fibers knew that I am. They rose and fell to the rhythm I created, to the symphony I composed, I conducted. I consider it a tragic comedy of arrogance when man denies what the smallest innervation knows. Man thinks he acts and moves outside my knowledge. How could it be so? I proclaim he does not. His own fibers clutch themselves, laughing at the idea. I am the flower, the wind, the rain, the sinew, the marrow, the rock, the author, the maker, the touch that set in motion all that you see, all that you know, and all that you do not see or know. I knit you. I put breath in you. I am coded in every cell. Every nanosecond of time falls in step as I will it so. I am in you. I am in you. I am all. Even when you perceive nothing, still I am there. As I tell you this here and now, pressing my truth into your breast, your very heart presses it further in. You guys, I didn't have paper or pen when he gave that to me. I got paper and pen the next day, and that is exactly what he said. And I am not a good person to remember to write things down, especially after being in a coma. So this is what I wanted to share with you. That was my reflection on this. I was so profoundly changed by my experience. I'm open to being hurt and to being loved. I'm learning that hurt people hurt people. I try to use kind words to turn away anger. It doesn't always work, but a soft word rarely hurts. It seems easier to discern the difference between my own internal chatter and the promptings of the Holy Spirit. God continues to do profound things in me and through me. I've definitely had many difficult challenges, as you guys know, but I see them differently. I can choose to let circumstances break me or take those opportunities to become more. I try to engage with other people in a more real and meaningful way. I'm learning to be more authentic and vulnerable, especially when being vulnerable is hard. I feel sad. If I feel sad, I'm much less likely to hide it. If I feel angry, I'm more likely to temper it with love or at least understanding. I am flawed and beautifully so. Love carries us while pain and mistakes build us. Every awful thing is an opportunity. We can shrink from it or rise to it. I choose to rise. I used to build walls to protect myself. But the thing with wall building is this: while walls do keep people out, they also keep you in. You make yourself a captive and unwittingly become your own jailer. You limit all potential. I've been taking down those walls every day. I tear down a bit more, one brick at a time. My prison is looking a lot like rubble these days. It lays all around me, and I refuse to put it back up. I refuse. I am climbing on top of the remains and rubble. I see freedom on the other side, and I am claiming it. I'm taking back all I surrendered. I refuse to make myself a slave or a captive. Not after all God has done for me, not after how he loved me and healed me. He saw me, all of me, the good and the bad. Instead of hiding from him in shame, I chose to surrender in his presence. In that moment, when I laid myself bare before God, he took all my shame and vanquished it. He took all the good in me and magnified it. He made me more, and I refuse to squander it. God is giving me a do-over. He's giving me life and love and people to connect with. That's all in front of me now. And rather than hide, I choose to say yes. I choose to say yes, and I won't shrink from it. I hope his light still shines from me. I hope it continues to just pour out, because to keep it for only myself would be theft. To give it, that's my gain. Loving others is a choice, and that choice heals me every day. So if you hadn't heard that, I hope it blesses you. If you had heard it, I hope it reminds you um, that we're so much more than this, you guys. Just hang in there. Just hang in there. I'm going to make sure I don't have any comments. I'm going to close this out in prayer. I think we're caught up. Nellie says, hold on, let me make sure. I just want to make sure we have all the comments. Nellie says, when do you do your regular shows and what platform? I've been out of touch. I'm on Rumble, and that link that I put into the video with Noel Wu, that will get you to my website. Hold on a second, or not to my website, but to my Rumble channel. You're welcome, Enlighten. Let me pull up my Rumble channel for people who don't know where I am. Rumble. So I do a show there on Thursday nights, and it's just a mod podge of, current events, things like that. And And we do sometimes get into this. It kind of goes where it goes. At 10, at 9 or 10, it kind of goes off the rails. So if your kids are listening, we kind of go through funny stories that are a little bit irreverent. Let me get this link for you. Here's the link to Rumble. Where do I put that? Here, I guess. Yeah. Well, Rumble Rants won't need it. Let's put it on Facebook. How about that? That light is right on the screen. Paste. There you go. Okay. Are we all caught up now? I think we are. All right. So let me close this out in prayer so I can get that dinner made. Okay, guys? Heavenly Father, we just come before you today and we just confess that this last 2 years have beat the absolute heck out of us. I feel like I'm the mayor of Crazy Town. I really do. I don't know what's going on, but I see the confusion that's being sown. And we know that you are not a God of confusion. And when there's confusion present, we know it's not from you. And that's what makes it easy to pick it out and know that that is not from you. And it doesn't matter how high up or who they are, who these people are that are telling us that this is the real way things should be, and that we've just been intolerant and horrible all these years up until now, and that this is going to be the change that brings humanity back to humanity. We know that's not true. We know this is not the way that you have intended for things to go. And Father, we just want to ask your forgiveness for handing over the wheel to other people and just kind of putting blinders on and plowing through our own lives and not realizing that a lot of these decisions around us, we need to be a part in that, and we need to be monitoring that things are being done properly, because we're in a hot mess now. We are in a hot mess. And Father, I just come to you and I ask you, when you were going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, who was it that came to you? Was it Job? I can't remember. Came to you and said, would you spare the city for the sake of 100 good men, or 10? And it finally got down to one. Would you spare it for one person, one good person? And God said he would. And Father, we are just standing in the gap today. We're standing in the gap. We are asking that you take our belief and our faith and our humility and our sin, and you turn it for good. And you show us the way. You show us how to be the light, and we'll do it. We will say yes. Father, we're not going to hide anymore. We're not going to hide in our houses. We're not going to just disengage from people because they believe differently than us. We are going to be the light on a hill, and we're going to help shine the way back to a society that makes some sense. This is just crazy. We can't keep going on like this. And we know that it's because we've stepped away and we've turned from you that this is all happening. We want to blame it on the other guy. We want to blame it on the bad guy. We want to blame it on Satan. But we have the power of God in us, and we have just handed it over. And we're so sorry for that. And we just beg your forgiveness for that. And we thank you that you've given us this time together, and that you will use this time to help us search our souls and find out what we are supposed to be doing. Father, drop it on us like a ton of bricks, because we don't see it otherwise, so that when there's something we're supposed to be doing, somebody you've put in our path to help or to love, some project that you need us to do, drop the bricks so that we know it's from you, and that we don't just push it off or think, oh, I could never do that. Help us to trust that you're giving us everything we need to get the things done that need done, Father. And we just thank you so much for being the living God, for sending your son to pay the ultimate price so that we could live free and not live as slaves and not live in bitterness and depression. We thank you for that. And we claim that victory. And we announce to the world that this foe is just bluster. He's just walking around, running his mouth, and that's all the power he's got. We have the power. We have the light of God, Father. And I just pray that you would help us show that to the world and bring them to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, guys. I hope that lifted you up. Don't forget to pop in the freezer. Barbara, you're my spirit animal. It's in a can, so it's really important that I don't forget it. I hope that blessed you guys. I just felt like I missed the little informal chats. And I'd like to do more of them. Let me know if that's something you'd like me to do, because I'm happy to get on and do more of them for you. So I'm going to end it there. I love you guys, whole big bunches. Thank you for hanging out with me. COVID-19 warrior, out.
When we stumble and it all goes wrong, only you can make it right. So I say, oh, I'm learning to be the light. Whoa.